Hey guys, welcome to the Daily Word Bible Study, a plain and simple book by book, chapter by chapter, and verse by verse study through the entire Bible. Currently, we are in Daniel chapter 8, and we're going to continue. Last time, we started Daniel chapter 8. We started the vision that he had, and in this section, we'll get into the interpretation. Now, as I said, the book of Daniel can be divided into two sections. The first 6 chapters is the historical narrative of Daniel's life, and and the one particular prophecy that we have and found is found in chapter 2, which he interprets a dream that God had given to Nebuchadnezzar. This dream is the essential reason for the book of Daniel. The latter 6 chapters of Daniel is visions and prophecies that he is receiving, explaining in further detail, in greater detail, this image. Now, this image pretty much is, at the time of the giving, 5 world dominating kingdoms that brings us all the way to the end of the age, in which the rock that you see here is the kingdom of Christ, destroying all of these kingdoms. Now, the statue also represents man, humankind, ungodly humankind. It represents the wickedness of man and their kingdoms. And you can also say God's decree for the time in which man will be on this earth. You also can look at this just as a sidebar, that when Jesus says that the gospel will be preached in all the world or to all nations, you have to look at this from not a geographical perspective, in which many Christians do. They say, well, for example, a lot of Christian television networks will say, well, we got satellites, we reached the entire planet, so now we're going to bring about the end of the world, bring about the coming of Christ. No, you're not. Because the all nations represent this kingdom which spans time. Okay, so that, for example, we right now are between the legs of iron, as you see here, and the feet of iron and clay. The kingdom of the feet of iron and clay has not arisen yet. We'll get to that later, more on that later. But the first, from our perspective, as we look back in time, 4 of these kingdoms have already come and gone. So the Babylonian kingdom, which is the head of gold, the chest and arms of silver, which is the Median Persians, the belly of thighs and the belly of thighs and belly and thighs of bronze, which is the kingdom of Greece, the Grecian kingdom, and then the legs of iron, which was the Roman Empire. Now, those kingdoms have already come and gone. The Roman kingdom fell, I believe, in the late 4th century, around the 5th century, something like that. And so, um, um, let me see if I can find a better date for that. Hold on, let me go back to my thumbnail here. Okay, so yeah, it fell somewhere around 476 BC, somewhere around there. So those kingdoms have all come and gone, which also means this prophecy has already come to pass. So we are yet, what kingdom is left is the kingdom of the feet of iron and clay. Now, in this artist's rendition, some people call this the restored Roman Empire. Scripture doesn't say that, but my guess is the reason why some people kind of think it would be the restored Roman Empire is because if you notice, it says the legs of iron, and then you see here the feet of iron and clay, so the commonality is iron. Again, that's just a guess, but it doesn't say that. We're going to get into this the kingdom of the feet of iron and clay because throughout, so far, as we see, Daniel is most curious about this kingdom, about this last ruler we call the Antichrist, the beast. And so again, there's a lot of information on this. So I'll get into that. But again, I want to say this. What is amazing about this is fulfilled prophecy. Fulfilled prophecy. I can't stress that enough. So let's get into it. As I said in the last study, we we uh we talked about this. I want to look at verse 11 again, though. Actually, I want to look at verse 9, and it says, "From one of them a little horn emerged and grew extensively towards the south and east and towards the beautiful land. It grew as high as the heavenly host, made some of the stars and some of the hosts fall to the earth." That's an interesting statement. We're going to get to the interpretation of that. And it says, "and trample them." Verse 11, "It made itself great even up to the prince of the hosts. It removed the daily sacrifice and overthrew the place of his sanctuary." So this is very interesting because remember Jesus talked about that. So let me show you that. Matthew 24. And this is mentioned in 3 places in Daniel. So one, it is mentioned here, and then it's going to be mentioned in Daniel 9, and it's also going to be mentioned in Daniel 12, chapter 12. So let me show you here. This is Matthew 24. Matthew 24. And so chapter 15 says, "So when you see the abomination that caused desolation." So notice this direct language here, spoken by the prophet Daniel, standing in the holy place. Let the reader understand. Now there's a lot about this that we've covered before, but notice again what he says here. Verse 11, again, "It made itself grow up, made itself great, even to the prince of hosts. It removed the daily sacrifice and overthrew the sanctuary because of the rebellion, a host together with the daily sacrifice will be given over." And then look at verse 13. "And then I heard the Holy One speaking to another and said, how long will the events of this vision last?" Then he says, "The daily sacrifice, the rebellion that makes desolate, the giving over of the sanctuary of the host to be trampled." And he says 2300. Now that 2300 evenings is 3.5 years, which we'll get to later. We've covered it before, but it's the last, what's called the Great Tribulation, which lasts 7 years. And as we will see, even in the next chapter, he makes a covenant for one, for many, for a week, which is the 7-year period. And then in the middle of the week, he breaks the covenant. And then we see this abomination spoken over and over again. And we also know when this period is going to happen, which we already know by the simple reading of the text. It hasn't happened yet. Now, I want to show one more verse with this to show continuity of the scriptures, and that is in Revelation itself, chapter 12. I want you to see some of the reading here. Let's see. Now, I want you to, I'm going to read this again. It said, verse 11, "It made itself great." No, verse 10. It says, "It grew as high as the heavenly host, made some of the stars and some of the host fall to the earth, and trampled them. It made itself great even up to the prince of hosts." Now I want you to keep that in mind as we read now in chapter 12. And notice what he says here. A great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and a crown of stars on her head. She was pregnant. She cried out in agony as she was to give birth. Then another sign appeared in heaven. There was a great fiery red dragon, having 7 heads, 10 horns, and on its head were 7 diadems. His tail swept away a third of the stars in heaven and hurled them to the earth. And then he says, and the dragon stood in front of the woman who was about to give birth, so that when she did give birth, he might devour the child. But she gave birth to a son, a male who was going to shepherd all nations with an iron scepter. And her child was caught up to God and to his throne. And the woman fled to the wilderness, where she had a place prepared by God to be fed there for 1,260 days. So, I'm going to go back now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to chapter 1 and read, and just to keep the continuity here, so you can understand, again, the entire interpretation here, which is phenomenal. Verse 1 again says, and I, in the 3rd year of King Belshazzar's reign, a vision appeared to me, Daniel, after one that appeared to me earlier. I saw the vision, and as I watched, I was in the fortress city of Susa, in the province of Elam, and I saw the vision that I was beside the Ulai canal. I looked up, and there was a ram standing beside the canal. He had 2 horns. The 2 horns were long, but one was longer than the other. And the longer one came up. By the way, this would be the Mede and Persian, which we will see. I saw a ram charging to the west, to the north, and to the south. No animal could stand against him, and there was no one to rescue from his power. He did whatever he wanted and became great. And as I was observing, the male goat appeared, coming from the west across the surface of the entire earth without touching the ground. The goat had a conspicuous horn between his eyes. He came towards the 2-horned ram I had seen standing beside the canal and rushed at him with savage fury. And I saw him approaching the ram, and infuriated with him, he struck the ram, shattering his 2 horns. And the ram was not strong enough to stand against him. The goat threw him to the ground and trampled him, and there was no one to rescue the ram from its power than the goat. Then the male goat became very great, but when he became powerful, a large horn shattered. His large horn was shattered. 4 conspicuous horns came up in his place, pointing towards the 4 winds of the heavens. From one of them, a little horn emerged and grew extensively towards the south and the east and towards the beautiful land. It grew as high as the heavenly host, made some of the stars and some of the hosts fall from the earth and trampled them. It made itself great even up to the prince of the host. It removed his daily sacrifice and overthrew his place in the sanctuary, because rebellion, a host together with the daily sacrifice, will be given over. The horn will throw truth to the ground and will be successful in whatever he does. And I heard the one speaking to another Holy One and said to the speaker, how long will the events of this vision last? The daily sacrifice. And then he said, and so he's making clear what he's talking about. How long will this vision last? The daily sacrifice, the rebellion that makes desolate, the giving them over to the sanctuary, and of the host to be trampled. He said to me, for 2,300 evenings and mornings, then the sanctuary will be restored. Now, this is the interpretations, okay? I might go a little long with this because I took a little longer with my than I wanted to. Anyway, verse 15 says, while I, Daniel, was watching the vision and trying to understand it, there stood before me someone who appeared to be a man. I heard a human voice calling from the middle of the UI canal. Gabriel explained the vision to the man. Now, Gabriel, if you know, is we see Gabriel all over the place. The word angel itself simply means a messenger, and there are different kinds of heavenly creatures. We usually kind of group them all together and call them angels, but they're not all angels. Seraphims, cherubims. Michael is an archangel. There are different kinds of heavenly creatures. Now, angels are pretty much messengers. So whenever you see angels, you pretty much, this is what you're going to see. They're giving a message. You'll see Gabriel later giving the message to Mary about having the son. You see Gabriel giving the message to Elizabeth, John the Baptist's mother. So he says, Gabriel explained the vision to the man, verse 17. So he approached where I was standing. When he came near, I was terrified and fell face down. Son of man, he said to me, understand that the vision referred to the time of the end. Okay. And while he was speaking to me, I fell into a deep sleep with my face to the ground. Then he touched me, made me stand up, and he said, I'm here to tell you what would happen at the conclusion of the time of wrath, because it refers to an appointed time of the end. So then he says, the two-horned ram that you saw represent the kings of the Media and Persian. The shaggy goat represents the king of Greece, and the large horn between his eyes represents the first king. The four horns that took place of the shattered horn represent four kingdoms that will arise from that nation, but without its power. Now, this is the most amazing thing, because what you see here, you see, and we have a historical fact about the Median Persian kingdoms, and then this historical fact about the Grecian kingdom, which we know to be Alexander the Great, that he was a very powerful military leader, that he conquered the world, but at a young age, at the height of his power, he died, and then his kingdom was split into four generals. So before this happened, right, hundreds of years before this happened, we have this prophecy then which came to pass. As I said, prophecy come to pass. This is what strengthens our faith. This is why I know Jesus is coming. This is why I know, because these prophecies have already come to pass. Okay, then he's going to switch now to verse 23. Near the end of their kingdoms, when the rebels have reached their full measure of their sin, an insolent king, skilled in intrigue, will come to the throne. His power will be great, but it will not be of his own. He will cause terrible destruction. Now, by the way, he's talking about now what we call the Antichrist. He says he will cause terrible destruction and will succeed in whatever he does. He will destroy the powerful along with the holy people. He will cause deceit to prosper through his cunning, and by his influence. And in his own mind, he will make himself great. He will destroy many in a time of peace. We're going to get more into him in the next chapter, right? He's going to make a covenant of peace and break it. In the middle. And then it says, he will even stand against the prince of princes. Yet he will be shattered, not by human hands. So this is, I cannot tell you how amazing this prophecy is here. It says, yet he will be shattered, not by human hands. The vision in the evening of the mornings. That has been told is true. Now, you must seal up the vision, because it refers to many days in the future. I, Daniel, was overcome and laid sick for days. Then I got up and went about the king's business. I was greatly disturbed by the vision and could not understand it. So here you see that Daniel takes a very great interest in this last kingdom, the Antichrist. Okay, and you could see here what this is. Now, what is kind of funny to me, and let me just say this. If you have watched the Left Behind series, the end-time Christian movies, Left Behind series, if you go back older, The Thief in the Night, that series, Tribulation Force, and all these kind of tribulation movies, I don't know, it's like these guys just don't bother to read the scripture, because they always make the Antichrist like he's going to operate secretly, that he doesn't really want people to know what his mission is, right? They don't read the Bible. That's, even though they're what I may call guilty pleasures, theologically wrong, they're horrible. Because notice what he says here. Notice some of the characteristics of this guy, of this Antichrist. He will make himself great. In other words, he will be arrogant, we saw it, prideful. So no, he is not going to, and he's certainly not going to uh, try to get Buck Rogers, the reporter, on his side. And oh my God, I got to stop Buck Rogers. He's going to be so arrogant. Remember, he's going to think of himself of God. Now, of course, if you want even further detail with this, go to Revelation chapter 13. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, where again, we see. Notice another thing about this, that Paul says in 2 Thessalonians chapter 3 that Jesus, he will be arrogant, he will set himself up as God, but then Jesus, he will be destroyed with the brightness of Jesus coming. Okay, that's why it says here that he will not be, he will be destroyed not with human hands. So, as I said, this is amazing here, just amazing. When he says here, this guy rises up at the feet of iron and clay. So we'll get more into that later in later verses, later chapters there. I'm sorry, but again, fulfill prophecy. Wow. All right, don't forget to like and share this video and subscribe to BP the Bible Perspective. And as always, if you have a thought or comment, add it to the comment section below. All comments are welcome, and I'll see you in the next study.